Bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this.
Just 5 minutes ago, a moment unfolded that left the entire United Kingdom holding its breath. Prince William appeared alongside Queen Camilla, a statement in hand. Yet what drew everyone's attention wasn't the prepared text itself, but rather William's slightly trembling hands, and the way Camilla's gaze seemed glued to the final lines. The message delivered was grave. King Charles's cancer had reached a significantly more alarming stage, and the monarch would be stepping back from public duties indefinitely. Meanwhile, William would begin assuming a broader range of responsibilities to ensure the continued functioning of royal operations. But that wasn't the most harrowing part. Just before the announcement, William received a sealed medical report. And according to details surrounding this story, there was a specific sentence within that report that was omitted from the public statement. So, what was that sentence? And why did the palace not want the nation to hear it? Before we delve deeper into what is happening behind the doors of Buckingham Palace, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future updates. I'd also love to know, where are you following this story from? Please leave your city or country in the comments section. Because immediately after that announcement, William left to meet his father in person, and what he witnessed at Clarence House made him realize that this crisis had begun long before the public became aware of it. But what William could not overlook lay within the medical report he had received just moments before filming began. The dossier was sealed, concise, clinical, and devoid of any superfluous words. William silently turned the pages. Then his gaze settled on a single line, one that would not appear in the public statement. King Charles's treatment was no longer expected to proceed according to the schedule previously communicated to the family. Just one sentence. Yet for William, it completely altered the significance of what had just been said on camera. For if the treatment schedule had changed, the questions immediately arose. When had Charles's condition shifted? Who had known beforehand? And why was the family only now being fully apprised of the situation? The filming session concluded in a heavy atmosphere. The camera lights were switched off. Staff began packing up the equipment. Camilla remained seated for a few moments, as if unready to leave the room. Finally, she turned to William and asked in a low voice whether they ought to disclose more to the public. William did not answer immediately. He placed the dossier on the table, glanced back at the pages he had just read, and remarked that the next 48 hours would reveal what the palace was still keeping behind closed doors. Shortly thereafter, William left Buckingham Palace and drove to Clarence House. There was no second press briefing. There was no supplementary statement. There was only a son seeking answers directly from his father. When William entered Clarence House, the first thing that made him pause was not the look on Charles's face. It was a red dispatch box. It sat right beside the king, still closed. Charles's reading glasses rested on top, yet the documents inside appeared untouched. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an ordinary detail. But William understood his father. Charles had long clung to his work. Briefing state papers, scheduled meetings, and even the most trivial tasks defined the rhythm of his life. Even while undergoing treatment, Charles strove to maintain his work routine, a way of proving that his illness did not define him. Thus, that unopened box spoke volumes, conveying something no official statement ever could. The illness had begun to directly affect the king's ability to discharge his duties. Camilla stood nearby. She had seen this coming. She told William how Charles would often return from treatment utterly exhausted, yet still force himself to rise early the next morning to work. There were nights when he barely slept. There were mornings when his body clearly hadn't recovered, yet he insisted that his schedule remain unchanged. And whenever someone suggested he take more time to rest, Charles's reaction was almost always the same. He would grow irritated, sometimes even angry. For to Charles, rest was not merely rest. It sounded too much like surrender. William listened without interrupting. The more he heard, the more he realized that the issue at hand was no longer about protecting the image of the monarchy, nor was it about making the king's schedule appear normal to the public. The real challenge was how to protect Charles from his own refusal to stop. Then Camilla added something that made William turn and look at her sharply. This was not the first time Charles had alarmed those around him. 2 nights earlier, in the privacy of a room while preparing for a national address, the king had stopped mid-sentence. And this time, he could not go on. Camilla remained silent for a few seconds before telling William exactly what had happened 2 nights earlier. That evening, Charles was privately rehearsing a nationwide address. The room was kept quiet, with only a handful of essential staff present. The draft had been carefully prepared, with every paragraph clearly marked, and initially, there was no indication that the rehearsal would be anything out of the ordinary. Charles began to read. The opening sentences went smoothly. His voice remained steady. He even paused a few times to request changes to the wording, just as he often did. Then midway through the speech, everything changed. Charles suddenly stopped. His eyes scanned down the page, but he seemed unable to find the next line. He tried looking back at the preceding paragraph, fell silent for a few seconds, and then slowly lowered the papers. No one in the room spoke. An aide moved to step forward, but Charles immediately ordered everyone to leave the room. Everyone, that is, except Camilla. The door closed, and only when the room was completely silent did Camilla see what Charles had tried to keep hidden from everyone else. He sat there staring at the unfinished speech. Charles was not angry with the speechwriter. He did not blame the staff. He did not complain about the schedule. He was angry with himself. For Camilla, that was perhaps the most frightening moment of all. She understood that Charles was battling more than just fatigue. He was fighting the sensation that his body was beginning to refuse what his will was determined to carry out. Yet the incident that night had not come out of nowhere. For weeks prior, the king's schedule had been quietly adjusted. Events were arranged around his treatment days. Meetings that would normally run long were shortened. Breaks between engagements were extended. The pressure on certain programs was eased, while staff tried to keep changes discreet enough that from the outside, everything still appeared normal. Charles continued to make appearances. He kept reading documents. He kept meeting with officials. And with every task he completed, Camilla found more reason to believe that staying active was helping to keep his spirits up. For her, the work was more than just a duty. It gave Charles a reason to get up every morning. But William began to see things in a completely different light. He watched as meetings were cut short, as breaks grew longer, as events were quietly shuffled around the treatment schedule. And he began to wonder if the palace was truly helping Charles recover or merely constructing a facade perfect enough to avoid admitting that the king's health was failing. What unsettled William most was that every adjustment seemed to buy just a little more time. One more day without having to speak the truth. One more event to prove that everything was fine. One more reason for Charles to keep going, right up until the moment his body would no longer allow it. William looked at Camilla and realized that the speech rehearsal 2 nights prior hadn't been the start of the crisis. It had merely been a warning, because the moment that truly changed everything had occurred earlier, 4 days before the announcement. At Windsor Castle, Charles had walked into a private rehearsal determined to prove he could still carry out his duties just as before. But just minutes later, right before William's eyes, the king suddenly stopped. He reached one hand behind him. His fingers gripped the back of the nearest chair. And in that instant, William knew that this time they could no longer pretend that everything was under control. William immediately moved toward his father. Charles refused the help. He asked everyone present to leave the room. The door closed, leaving father and son alone. And with no other eyes upon him, Charles finally admitted what he had been hiding since the start of the day. He had been feeling unwell since morning. William froze. Charles knew his body wasn't in the best shape, Yet he had decided to go to Windsor anyway. He didn't want another event canceled. He didn't want another entry on the schedule to vanish simply because of his health. But to William, this was no longer a matter of dedication. It had become a risk. He demanded that a doctor be called immediately. Charles objected, but this time, William would not back down. A doctor was brought in via a private entrance to avoid attracting attention. The assessment was conducted discreetly, but the resulting conclusion left little room for debate. Charles needed to pause his current program. His treatment required a more intensive phase. And most importantly, his old schedule could not continue as before. William read the findings with a mix of fear and anger. But the next shock was even greater, for the question now was not just how frail Charles had become. It was, had anyone known about this beforehand? Camilla set out to find the answer. She confronted a senior aide who had been closely managing the king's schedule. At first, the aide tried to explain that every decision had been made in accordance with Charles's wishes. But Camilla pressed him for an answer. Finally, the truth came out. Warning signs had appeared before the rehearsal, and Charles had instructed the staff not to tell William. Camilla could hardly believe what she was hearing. Why? The answer left her speechless. Charles knew that if William fully grasped the gravity of the situation, he would immediately demand the cancellation of engagements. He feared losing control over his schedule, afraid that once he started making concessions, his duties would be stripped away one by one. For weeks, Camilla had believed that maintaining his schedule kept Charles strong. But at Windsor, that view shifted. Silence was no longer protecting the king. It was putting him in danger. When William learned that his father had actively withheld information from him, his fear quickly turned to anger. It was not because Charles was no longer as robust as he once was. It was because he had chosen to face it all alone. William did not want to hear further explanations from aides. He did not want a statement carefully crafted by advisors, nor did he want anyone standing between father and son. He demanded a private meeting with Charles. No doctors, no secretaries, no Camilla, no assistants, just the two of them in a closed room. For the impending confrontation was no longer simply a matter of a king clinging to control versus an heir preparing to shoulder greater responsibility. Beneath those titles lay something far more painful: a father who had concealed the truth, and a son who had just realized he might have been denied the chance to stand by his father's side when he needed his family the most. The door closed. Only Charles and William remained in the room, and for the first time since the crisis began, there was no one else to choose the words for them. William stood facing his father. He did not blame Charles for growing weaker. He did not blame him for needing treatment, nor for lacking the strength to maintain his previous schedule. What angered William was that Charles had known his condition was changing, yet had chosen to keep his family in the dark about the truth. Charles tried to explain. He said that a king could not simply cancel everything whenever his health faltered. Too many cancellations could unsettle the public. Constantly rescheduled meetings could raise questions among international partners, and if the palace were to suddenly slash the king's itinerary, people would begin to wonder if the monarchy was bracing for something far more serious. But there was another reason. William! Charles knew his son would have to shoulder the duties he was forced to leave behind. Meanwhile, Catherine still needed William by her side. George, Charlotte, and Louis needed their father, too. Charles said he did not want his illness to be the thing that took William away from his family day by day. William did not reply. He placed the medical report on the table between them. Silence filled the room. Then William asked a simple question. Why did the doctor have to tell me how you were really doing before you told me yourself? Charles looked down at the report. He did not answer immediately. The silence stretched on, making further explanation almost unnecessary. Finally, Charles admitted what he had likely been unwilling to voice aloud. If he said his health was failing, if he acknowledged that his treatment wasn't going as planned, then it would all become too real. It would no longer feel like a difficult phase he simply had to weather. It would begin to feel permanent. The anger on William's face shifted. He was still hurting, but now he began to see the fear beneath his father's stubbornness. William stepped closer and said, "Duty doesn't mean disappearing on your own." Charles looked up. William said that silence didn't protect the family. It only forced Camilla to watch her husband weaken without knowing the full truth. It left Catherine seeing his anxiety, but unaware of what was coming. And then there were George, Charlotte, and Louis. If the situation changed suddenly, those children would face a fear they had never been given the chance to prepare for. At this point, Charles stopped arguing. The defensiveness vanished from his voice. For a few seconds, the man sitting before William no longer seemed like a king trying to maintain control. He was simply a father, realizing that in his attempt to shield his family from fear, he had left them frightened in the dark. Charles turned to the side table. He pulled open a small drawer. William watched. Inside was not another medical report, nor was it a prepared press statement. Charles took out a stack of papers, written in his own hand. He placed them in front of William. Those pages had been prepared in advance. And that made William realize a truth that weighed even heavier. Even though Charles had tried to live as if things could go on as normal, somewhere deep down, the king knew the day might come when his son would have to shoulder responsibilities he no longer had the strength to carry himself. Charles slid the papers toward William. They were instructions for the heir. But the first lines William read did not speak of the throne. They spoke of family. Charles wrote that, should he be absent for an extended period, the first thing William needed to safeguard was not the image of the monarchy, but the unity of those left behind. Do not let responsibility drive people apart. Do not let silence become a habit. And more importantly, do not let the crown take away the time William needed to spend with Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. William read through the lines slowly. This was no ordinary administrative directive. Interspersed with instructions regarding state duties was the warning of a father who seemed to foresee the price his son might have to pay. Charles had dedicated his entire life to duty, and now he was urging William not to let duty consume the rest of his life. Just then the door opened. Camilla entered. She glanced at the papers in William's hand, then at Charles. But before she could ask, Charles made another decision. From this moment on, if medical advice were ignored, William had the authority to cancel any of the king's engagements. Camilla raised no objection. William said nothing either, for both understood that Charles had voluntarily relinquished a measure of control he had been determined to hold on to at all costs just days earlier. But the change did not stop in that room. Shortly thereafter, William entered a private meeting with constitutional advisors. The chair reserved for the monarch remained empty at the head of the table. William looked at it, then chose a different seat. Charles was still king. No one in the room was permitted to forget that. Yet the dossiers placed before William signaled that a new reality had begun. He would take on investitures, diplomatic receptions, formal events, certain meetings, and the bulk of the public engagements that Charles was temporarily unable to fulfill. Each duty was read aloud. Each page of the calendar was turned. And with every new responsibility, William felt the growing weight of the situation. This was no longer just a matter of stepping in for his father at a few events. A new structure was taking shape around Charles's absence. Princess Anne was also being brought into the plan. She would take on certain ceremonies, audiences, and selected duties to ensure the pressure didn't fall entirely on William. After the meeting, Anne found her nephew standing alone before the expanded schedule. She asked him what he feared most. William looked at the days ahead, already packed full. Then he admitted something he hadn't voiced in the meeting room. Taking on his father's work made him feel as though he were preparing for Charles's permanent absence rather than waiting for his recovery. Anne did not dismiss that fear. She simply reminded William that shouldering some of Charles's responsibilities did not mean usurping his position. It was the family's way of keeping things moving until the king could return. But moments later, another note was placed before William. And this time he read it twice. In the original plan, William's expanded authority was intended to last only for a set period. Charles had personally removed that limit. No more few weeks. No more predetermined end date. The new arrangement would continue until the doctors cleared the king to return to official duties. William closed the folder. The handover no longer resembled a short-term emergency measure. It had become an indefinite period of unknown duration. And while William faced an ever-filling schedule in another room, Camilla was about to confront the exact opposite scenario. Charles's calendar is being taken down, event by event, card by card, until the empty spaces begin to outnumber the remaining days. Camilla stood at the doorway of Charles's study, quietly watching, as staff members removed cards from the schedule one by one. A ceremony vanished. Then a reception. A diplomatic meeting was reassigned to someone else. Then came an event Charles had insisted he would attend. There were no arguments, no solemn announcements, just small cards being taken down, yet to Camilla, every resulting gap felt like a piece of Charles's life being stripped away. When the staff left the room, she stepped forward. Camilla reached out to touch a blank space on the calendar. Just weeks ago, those days had been packed full. Now, most of the work had been shifted to William or Anne, or postponed indefinitely. Outside that room, the monarchy continued to function almost ceaselessly. William took on additional public duties. Anne stepped in to fill the ceremonial gaps. Aides rearranged schedules, swapped representatives, and ensured that essential obligations were met. From the outside, the system remained stable, but it was precisely that stability that made the truth so painful. Everything could go on even if Charles was forced to step back. Camilla was still standing by the calendar when Charles entered. She turned to her husband and finally voiced what had been weighing on her heart. Perhaps she had encouraged him to keep going for too long over the past few months. Whenever Charles returned from treatment, insisting he could still work, Camilla had believed him. Whenever he wanted to keep an event on the books, she had helped protect that schedule. She had thought she was helping Charles maintain a sense of normalcy. Now she wondered if she had inadvertently helped him ignore the limits of his own body. Charles shook his head. He did not blame her. He admitted to himself that he had clung to Camilla's optimism because it was what he wanted to hear. If she believed he could carry on, he could convince himself that everything was still under control. Then Charles said something Camilla hadn't expected. "Stop shielding me from William." Camilla looked at him. Charles understood that every time she tried to soothe William's anxiety, and every time the staff held back a warning sign, they were unwittingly helping him continue to avoid facing what he himself did not want to confront. Secrecy had become more dangerous than fear. Just then the phone rang. It was a call from the medical team. Charles needed to be assessed sooner than planned. And this time, the treatment plan wouldn't simply be a matter of coming and going in a single day. He would have to stay overnight. Camilla didn't argue. She went into the next room and picked up a small bag. She placed items inside slowly, almost mechanically. No one said the situation had worsened, but no one needed to say it. A short while later, William arrived at Clarence's house. He brought no aides with him. There was no entourage of advisors. He carried no files. Charles watched his son walk in and asked for only one thing. He wanted to speak with William in private. Camilla understood immediately. She picked up the packed bag, left the room, and closed the door behind her. The last time father and son had been alone together, the room had been filled with anger, questions, and truths that had been hidden for too long. But this time would be different. There was nothing left for Charles to protect through silence. There was no schedule requiring him to prove his strength. And before embarking on this new phase of treatment, Charles had one last thing he wanted to give William. Not power, not the throne. Rather, it is the words of a father to his son spoken in the moment. They both finally realized there were things that could no longer be put off. This time, Charles and William did not argue. There were no medical reports lying between them, no questions about who knew what or who had the authority to decide the king's schedule. Charles simply looked at his son and spoke of family. He urged William not to repeat the pattern of emotional distance that had persisted across generations of royals. no matter how heavy the responsibilities William had to safeguard time for Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. For one day, the crown might demand almost all of his time, but family should not be the price paid for it. Then Charles admitted something more difficult. He had once thought that if he kept working, William would worry less. If the schedule remained full, if meetings continued, if the king still made public appearances, perhaps everyone would believe that things were fine. But he had been wrong. By concealing the truth, Charles had not protected William. He had merely deprived his son of the chance to stand by his side with honesty. William did not answer immediately. He reached across the space between them and took his father's hand. Then he made a promise. He would shoulder the necessary responsibilities. He would appear where Charles could not. He would help keep the monarchy running. But he would not act as though his father's reign had ended. Charles was still king, and his family would be waiting for his return. Charles leaned forward and took a small handwritten card from his pocket. It bore just 3 requests. Keep the working royals united. Shield George, Charlotte, and Louis from public alarm. And if the treatment dragged on, do not let Camilla face it all alone. William took the card, but he also asked his father for a promise in return. No more secrets, no more withholding serious medical warnings, no more trying to protect the family by pushing them away. Charles agreed. By evening, the news had spread beyond the palace walls. People began to gather outside Buckingham Palace. Amidst the crowd, a child walked up to the gates and placed a small card, wishing the king a speedy recovery. There were no cheers, only an eerie silence hung over the crowd. At the same time, William returned to Windsor. Catherine was by his side as George, Charlotte, and Louis were called over. William explained that their grandfather needed further treatment and would require a longer period of rest. He tried to keep his voice steady, but Catherine understood what the children could not yet fully grasp. William was preparing for a greater responsibility, all while trying to believe it was only temporary. The next morning at Clarence's house, the small bag Camilla had packed was ready. She adjusted Charles's coat. William stood by the door. There was no ceremony, no long line of officials. Just 3 people preparing for something none of them truly wanted to face. Charles walked toward the car. Then he stopped. He turned toward William. For a moment, all formalities seemed to vanish. Charles did not reach out to shake his son's hand. He stepped forward and embraced William. William embraced his father in return. It lasted longer than either had intended. Charles acknowledged that there was something even harder than bearing the weight of the crown. It was accepting that at some point one needs help from others. As Charles walked toward the car, Camilla turned to thank William for standing by her side over the past few days. William simply said that their responsibility now was not to keep up appearances, not to prove that everything was normal, but to protect Charles. The car slowly pulled away from Clarence's house. Afterward, William returned with his father's handwritten note. He did not place it among state documents. He did not set it beside files regarding the duties that had just been handed over. William tucked it away in his private desk drawer. For the words written there were not the commands of a king to his heir, at least not primarily. They were the words of a father to his son. And as Charles entered a new phase of treatment, William stood there not merely as a man awaiting the throne. He stood there as a son finally permitted to share the burden his father had tried to shoulder alone for so long. The crown endures, but this time the family no longer attempts to mask the fear lying beneath it. And now the biggest question remains: if this transition is prolonged, is William merely standing in temporarily for his father? Or will this moment alter his role forever? What do you think? Please share your views in the comments section. And if you wish to keep following stories about the British royal family, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for staying with us until the end, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.